Hey guys, Donovan Myers back with the third and final video for the Mad Catz Arcade FightStick V.S. edition. This time I'm going to be dual modding it with a chimp. As you can see, I've left off pretty much where I did in the last video, except I've removed the cover from this punch down and the cover from the main PCB over here. I've also taken the bottom and all the sides off. I was wrong on my guess about this being part of the bottom and holding it together. I think it's just some sort of nameplate thing. I've seen now on the SRK forums that people are putting things here, maybe that's the idea. Looks like from the back there's some sticky goo here holding just this little thin piece of plastic on, so not exactly sure what the plan is for that, but I'm excited to see what Mad Catz is going to release as parts for this stick. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the mod. So the first step here is going to be to, I've already unscrewed this, pull off this PCB, and then desolder the USB wire. Whew! Now it's several days later. I went to go start working on this and my soldering iron wasn't heating up, so couldn't get one. Of course it was on back order, so I'm using this piece of crap Weller that I ran out and got at Home Depot. Hopefully this will do the job. All I really need to do is desolder the USB here, and I think everything else can mostly be solderless. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, it's been a couple days, Markman tweeted a picture of a better place to mount the chimp. Somebody had put it here, right on top of this. I'm still going to use tape to do it. You could, if you're feeling brave, use screws and put them right into the plastic here. But this is the stock PCB that we're going to be pulling the USB out of, so it'll be nice to connect it all real close right there. I'm also going to orient it this way so the USB plug again is in the back out of the way, and all of the ports that I'm going to be using are out facing where they need to go, and the USB that we're going to pull off here goes right into here, so it'll be nice and close and keep everything clean. Okay, so I pulled off all of the harnesses from here. I had to take off the glue. There's some glue over this USB cable I'm going to pull off, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start desoldering. Okay, so there you have it. I got these off. It was a little more tedious than with my decent soldering iron, and I was a little scared here, but I managed to get all of that out of there. There's still a little solder left I'm going to have to suck out. Okay, so I have this bundle of wires that I'm going to use. I just had them laying around, and there's 5 of them, so that's perfect. On the chimp here, there's even a little note for you reminding you that data minus is white and data plus is green. So in this case, I'm going to use, again, white for data minus, red for power, and I'm going to use orange in place of the green for the data plus, gray for my regular ground, and the brown for my other ground, basically the shielding ground, or whatever you want to call it. It's just the shielding that wraps around the USB cable. It's not really necessary. Okay, so it's all done. What you saw me doing on the back was just nipping these off so there wasn't a chance that I would get them cross touching each other, or to keep them, you know, so they aren't super long poking out. The other side here you can see, like I said, I did red for 5 volt, white for data minus, orange for data plus, my ground is gray, and my shielding ground is brown. So all that stuff's going to go in here. The extra ground, the shielding ground, will just go probably in one of these ground slots here. Okay, so here we are back again. I'm just going to plug all the harnesses back in and get the chimp mounted on top after I put the black box back on, so that we can begin hooking everything up. Alright, I may be losing my mind. It took 2 pieces of tape to get it high enough because of the solder points on here, and I lined it up center with this cover so that I could still get a screwdriver into these holes to still take this off without having to remove the tape and take that off. I had put the side on and the top on to make sure I had enough clearance for everything, and everything looks good. So I'm just going to continue doing wires. So as I said, the stock USB is going to come in and go into this part where it's labeled VCC, OD-, OD+, and ground. And I will, I guess, wire this other ground up to another open ground spot. Alright, because I stuck this down, I made that way harder on myself than it needed to be. I think you'll find it much easier to screw these in and then stick this part down. But the rest shouldn't be too bad. The next thing I'm going to do is hook up the USB to the Xbox PCB by trimming these down and connecting them over here. Alright, USBs are connected, but the next step now is to just connect up all the buttons. And the way I'm going to do that is, I have all these wires that I made when I had this ChImp SMD in my VLX, and all it is a long piece of wire that's going to go back to the chimp on this end, and then what I did was crimp the 0.110 quick disconnect onto this end with two wires in it and have this little one. This is the female and this is the male, and this part is going to go into the punch down at the signal part, and then the one that was in there is just going to connect to this. And that's going to be a really easy way to do it rather than doing that solderless trick where you run it through and jam it in. So I'm going to use a multimeter with it set to the continuity test to figure out which one of these rows is signal and which one is ground. The easiest way to do that, just grab some of the wires. This is the bottom row. If I touch this one and this one and beep, that means it's ground. So this whole bottom row is ground. If I grab, just to double check, the top row here, and by top I mean the one next to the connections for those harnesses. So you can see here they're touching and they're not beeping. Okay, so the bottom row here is your ground. We don't need to mess with that at all. The only thing we need are the signals for the buttons, and that's where my little harnesses I made are going to go. Okay, so I ended up putting all those connectors in here in this box and trying to get this in, and it's really just not fitting. So I'm going to switch it, so instead of hooking it up directly to the punch down, my little intermediate wires are going to be hooked up at the button area. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch all those now. Okay, done. So it's going to be a little bit messier bringing these around from the buttons rather than nice and neat over from here. But I just didn't feel right about having all that stuff pushing so hard on all of this when trying to put that plastic cover back on. I guess you could leave it off, but I kind of want everything to go back the way it came. Okay, so I have them all screwed into the chimp. Now you can see here, going down, 1 kick is black, 2 kick is brown, 3 is purple, 4 is blue, and then 1 punch is red, 2 is orange, 3 is green, and 4 is yellow. And then over here on this side you can see I've plugged in my start and select, which also connect right about there where it says start and select. And you can see exactly what my plan is with the buttons, where I have this little piece that lets the original connector connect on, and then my wire that comes back to the chimp, thus creating like the connection of a signal from this button to this, which goes to the Xbox PCB or straight to the chimp, depending on which console you're plugged into. That's which PCB gets the signal. Alright, so what I have here is the harness from the Joystick. This was my attempt at a solderless trick. This was not reliable when I went into testing though, because some of these wires were touching and getting crossed. So I think the best way to do it is to splice this in. So I'm going to use a stock JLF harness as a guide, and using the same thing here. So right will be green, left will be yellow, up will be orange, and down will be red. I've gone ahead and put a little piece of tape here to show myself where I wanted it. The way this goes back into the stock PCB, it actually goes over it with that cover here. So if I splice it about here, I can bring my wires back and hook them up. I'm going to take an X-Acto knife to split these wires apart, and then I'm also going to use the X-Acto knife to really carefully cut out like almost a ½ inch, probably a ¼ inch, to expose the wire without actually cutting the wire, and like carefully trimming off the shielding. Okay, so I actually managed to fit my wire strippers through there and got it over that first wire, held down and pulled it a little bit back, and then I just need to make another cut and you can see now there's this piece that's essentially floating between the wires there, and this is where I'll use the X-Acto knife to cut that off. Alright, this is going to be some very delicate work. This wire is thinner than the old TE cables. You can see I kind of broke some of those off, but it's going to be okay because I'm going to wrap my wire around that and solder it all back together. And you can kind of see here they're now together, and I'm just going to wrap some tape around here and move on to the next one to keep them from touching each other. Alright, so there's the next one. I'm going to tape that as well, keep doing it, tape the whole thing up when I'm done, remove this crap, and then put it back in the stick and screw these into the proper terminals. You can kind of make out here, this is where I did all the soldering. Here's the electrical tape, and I have the stick wire wound around underneath this, hooked up to the stick, and then all my 4 colors are coming right across here and screwing into the proper spots. Alright, so I've popped the cover off of the PCB here to get to the guide button connector here. I could also do it off this and not have to pull this back off, but the glue is still in here and I already removed the glue from here. So this bottom slot down here, the second pin over, is the guide button, and on here I'm just going to use the same trick with this yellow wire. So the one right next to the pink wire is guide. Just going to put that in there like that and connect it back down. Alright, got it on there nice and tight. It's not coming out. I'm going to screw this back down and then hook up the wire into the correct slot. It should be right here, real nice and close. Alright, officially everything's hooked up to the Chimp like it should be. I'm going to end up soldering an extension onto this wire and hooking it up to an open ground point over here. I just don't feel comfortable taping it off or leaving it hanging. Alright, so I've got it all back together. I hooked it up to my PC and tested it, and it works. Detected as a Chimp, and all of the buttons work, all the directions work, and the guide button works. Start and select, of course, too. And then I also tested the Xbox PCB to make sure everything still worked properly, and the way you do that is hold in low kick, medium punch, and high kick as you're plugging it in, and that forces it into 360 mode. So you can still use it as a 360 stick on your PC or let it use the Chimp. So let's take a look at the bottom here. Okay, so not too much cleaner than how I actually started. I ended up leaving this stuff long so that I could still get the top off. If I made this all nice and clean and tight, when I went to pull the top off, it would be stuck and I'd have to go through the bottom if I wanted to switch out any buttons or mess with the stick. So recap of what we did. Unscrewed the case for the Xbox PCB, pulled that out, pulled all of the ribbon cables off just for fun basically, desoldered the stock USB cable off of that, soldered in these 5 new wires for the USB connection into that, put that back down, put the case back on top, used some double-sided tape to affix this Chimp on top of it, and then wired in the USB. So when you do it, it's probably easier to wire in the USB first, then stick it down. Then we wired up the buttons by using these harnesses I made that were basically a long piece of wire with a female quick disconnect and then a short piece of wire coming out of that to a male that the stock connector goes on to. And we figured out that the bottom row down here is where the signal is, so that's where all of the wires that were coming out of there are the ones that are getting this little interception here. We did the solderless trick for the stick here by putting in the 4 directions into the proper spots, and lastly we hooked up the guide button using that solderless trick by removing this ribbon cable, shoving it in there, connecting it, and then screwing it into the proper spot. So that's it, stick's all ready to go, and I'm ready to play some Street Fighter X Tekken cross-platform.